This video is really going to help anybody who's been asked to write a project status report but hasn't got a template to work from, or somebody who probably hasn't got any experience of completing status reports and doesn't really understand what all the component parts mean. Or it will be useful to anyone in a PMO who has been assigned to go and create some sort of a PSR template perhaps. Hi, I'm Stuart Taylor from Influential PMO, and I'm here to support the project community. Every week I make new videos about project management. If that's something that interests you, make sure to hit the subscribe button. This video is the first part in a series about project status reports. This video will be about the components that go into a status report. The next video will be about how to move these components and shape them into an attractive looking template. And the next video after that will be about how to write project status reports in a truthful and meaningful way that will be understood by the people reading them. Oops. So I was just editing this and I realized that I didn't actually give any context as to why I'm using Excel in this, and whether you need to follow along with me and actually start making an Excel document yourself. You don't. The reason I'm using Excel is because I'm just making a simple list of the components that go into the status report, and I'm putting a column there where there's a description of each of those components as well. That list is going to be uploaded to my blog, and there'll be a link in the description where you can go and get that, so you don't have to follow along with me if you don't want to. The reason why it's useful is we'll be making a template for status report in the next video, and it's helpful to have these items already listed somewhere so that we can just drag and drop them, especially if we're going to do that in Excel, but it'll work in other tools as well. So apologies, that's why I'm using Excel. That's why I'm creating a list. You don't have to make your own one. There's no reason why you shouldn't, but you can just go and download the version that I'll have up on the blog. So sorry about that. Back to the video. Okay, so I'm going to widen the widths a little bit of these columns. And here we're going to put component, and I'm going to put a short description in here. So here we go. The first part that we'll put onto the status report is perhaps the most obvious part, easy to overlook, the project name. And this is the identifier of the project. If you happen to be working in an environment with lots of projects, you might have unique identifiers, project codes. Make sure you've got a component for that as well. The next part is the date. And to be clear, this is the date the report is written, not published. And the reason for that is if you put a date on here that's to do with whenever it's going to get published, things might have changed from the point at which you actually do the writing to the publication. So always put the date that you're writing the report, okay? Okay, so the next one is often overlooked, but it's important. It's the author, probably you. And this is the name of the report writer. But now the next part is actually part of the regular changing content of the report, and that will usually be the project status summary or update or words to that effect. And what this will include is a fairly brief description of how the project has done in the last period of reporting, any key milestones that are likely to come up, any details of any kind of major issues that are being experienced at that time, or any risks that are starting to emerge. So I'm just going to put here a brief description of progress, key emerging risks and issues. The next section we're going to work on here is the traffic light indicators, and sometimes these are referred to as the RAG colors, referring to red, amber and green. As we're focused in this video on just defining the components of the status report, I'm not going to go into a lot of depth on what each of these RAG scores refers to for each of these components. I'll touch on them, but the fact is everywhere's got a slightly different definition on it. Generally, if it's green, it usually means everything's on track, everything's fine. If it's red, that tends to mean that something's going wrong and it's going to impact the overall health of the project. And if it's amber, well, everywhere's got a slightly different take on this. Some people say that it means things are at risk. Some say that it's already started to go off track, but it's within tolerance. I'd suggest that you look for whatever guidance you've got at your company and see what people are asking for there. But a later video will give some useful definitions on that. So keep an eye out for that. Okay, so the first thing we'll put then is the overall project health RAG. And this will be a score to show the health of the project. I'm writing this one first, but the chances are you'll do this one last because all of the other component RAG scores will actually influence this one. Your company or organization might have some sort of different definitions on exactly how many components need to be non-green before the overall health turns non-green as well. So again, refer back to your company guidance on that. Standard project component RAG scores can include, but are not limited to, the plan, to show whether the plan is on track, costs, are costs on track? Sometimes this is referred to as budget, and that's fine. Not all projects get a budget though, so sometimes cost is just a little bit easier to refer to. Just going to update that to costs RAG. Scope often appears in these RAG components. That usually refers to whether there is a threat to the scope, whether the scope's likely to change for any reason, anything like that. So I'll put, is the scope likely to change or changed? Benefits. Are the benefits on track? They can change. During the course of your project, you might find that the benefits case for the project is just disappearing, and maybe things have changed in the scope. Maybe the project's become more expensive, but this is where this kind of thing sometimes has an impact. So the benefits case will actually get reduced perhaps, and you need to mark this. And it's interesting that you start to see the relationship now between those component RAGs, because you change the costs or the plan and suddenly other parts can be impacted as well. These things really do bleed into each other, so you need to keep an eye on them. Quality often comes up, so we'll have a quality RAG. What happens there is the project's going perfectly fine, then people start testing and starting to find that it's not meeting the acceptance criteria, and you need to start to report that. So is quality as, let's put it as expected. Another one that tends to come up is resources, and it's funny because usually if you get a resource problem, usually that means you'll have a plan problem because things are probably going to be late because you don't have enough resources, or you've lost a key resource, and usually it just results in a delay. So I'd say resources is an optional one. As I say, its impact can be felt elsewhere, but this is your opportunity to really highlight if there are any resource related issues. For example, you lose a key person off the project, and you may have to report the whole project as red as a result. It happens. A lot of places like to have a risk RAG on here. I'm not a fan of it. I tend to advise people not to have it. I see it as pointless, to be honest, because whatever risk impact there is that's worthy of calling out as anything other than green is most likely reflected somewhere in one of your other component RAGs. But some places like to have it because it can be used to highlight if there's a lot of risk in the project itself. I don't see why that's necessarily useful, because if the risks are being managed, what's the problem? Some people like to have it so that they can highlight if risks are becoming realized. Again, that impacts the component RAG. It's not one that I tend to put into my status reports, but I'm just including it here because it's popular for some reason. And based on that, I'm not really sure how to put a description on it. It will depend on how you intend to use it yourself. Personally, I wouldn't bother. Hey, if you liked the video, don't forget to hit the like button. It lets YouTube know that there's value in the video, and it helps the channel. Thank you. Oh, I've just thought of what I can put in the risk RAG. There we go. Okay, the next thing people will be interested in from your status report are, what have you been doing in the last reporting period? For this, you'll include details of your milestones and your deliverables. Don't waste people's time with, we've been doing these activities and we've been busy. People aren't interested. They're just interested in the tangible deliverables that are coming out of your project. And a good place for you to get a list of those is your project plan. So this is a great chance for you to just copy and paste items from your project plan with the word complete next to each of the items. So we'll have, say, deliverables from the previous reporting period. And just make a note there, it's deliverables, milestones, etc. If you've got key risks and issues that have been mitigated or resolved in that time, you can include that here as well. And the next part they'll be interested in are deliverables due in the next reporting period. So this is asking what you're going to do next. So we'll put deliverables, milestones, etc. But this time we'll include target dates. And if you've got the detail and you've got the space, owners. And if you want to go extra high quality, you can include an indicator of your confidence level. Whilst you're busy writing about the things you're going to do, you might want to also include a section in here on how you're going to address any of those component RAG items that are non-green. So we can put a return to green actions section in here. And these will be actions, deliverables, etc. to remedy non-green component RAGs. So you might start to see a little bit of repetition happening in the status report now. You might have already said in the project status summary update that there is a problem somewhere, such as the plan, perhaps there's a delay, and what you're going to do to resolve it. And now in the return to green actions, you're starting to write the actual details of what you're going to do to resolve that. And then later on in the report, we'll come to in a moment, there's a section for risks and issues, and your issue to do with your plan might well be in there as well, along with details. That's actually okay. I know it sounds repetitive, but it's absolutely fine for there to be a narrative that threads its way through the project status report and tells a consistent message to the reader. The next thing to include are key risks and issues that you need your stakeholders to be aware of. And this is a section, so I'm not going to put a description on here. So what you'll want to include are risk and issue IDs, if they're part of a larger database of risks and issues. So this will refer back to your risk register, your issue log. So it's unique identifiers, risk and issue names, risk and issue descriptions. And you will have seen a previous video on here probably, and if you haven't, you should really go and see it. It's one of my earlier pieces of work where I give an explanation on how to describe your risks so that it's clear to the reader what exactly the problem is. And the structure tends to be, there is a risk that, explain the risk, because, where you explain the circumstances, and the impact is, where you define exactly how long of a delay it's going to cause, how much it's going to cost, whatever measurable value that you can apply to it. I would suggest putting the risk and issue target closure date, and then perhaps the most important but most overlooked section are the risk and issue mitigation stroke resolution plan. For a status report, you don't necessarily have to include the entire plan. Just the current key steps, maybe something that you've completed in the last reporting period and what your next steps are. The idea is to show that the risk and issue is being actively managed and being worked on and hasn't just slipped to the back of your mind. Those are the activity-based components of the status report, but there are some other pieces of content as well that add value. And keep in mind, the person reading your report might not necessarily be working on your project on a regular basis, so this kind of background information can be extremely helpful to them, so make sure you find a place to include it. One of the points of interest on these reports is who is the sponsor. So, who is the sponsor? If you have a budget, make sure to include that, and make sure to include it in whatever currency you're operating with. As well as having a budget, which is the amount you've been assigned to spend on your project, you may also be tracking a forecast, also in whatever currency you're using. And if you're a really good project manager, you'll have an actual. Let's put an actual spend, and this will be in whatever currency you're using as well. So the budget is how much you've been assigned you can spend on your project. The forecast is what you expect to have spent by the end of the project or up to this point right now. And your actual spend is what you have spent up to this point. And the next useful piece of information would be a variance. And this will be the difference between the forecast and the actual. If you've got a variance and it's suggesting you're overspending and your costs rag is green, by the way, expect questions. There are a variety of other items you can include on the report depending on how much space you have. You might want to have something like the business unit that the project is delivering something for. It could be some details around the benefits. So this would be benefits details. You won't have a whole lot of space to include anything, but you can certainly say whether it's to make things go faster or make them cheaper, something to that effect. You might want to include the expected go live dates. You might want to include the expected project closure date. You might want to include what stage you're in from the project lifecycle. You might be expected to put the stage end date so people know when you're going to move into the next stage. Okay, that's all of the components I can think of right now. I'm bound to have forgotten something. If I have, I'm sorry. Include it in the comments and make a note of what a terrible YouTube teacher I am. I'm going to upload this list to my blogging site on influentialpmo.com. I will include the link in the description so you can go straight to that. And feel free to use it as a reference point for your own status reports. I hope this has been helpful to you. Keep an eye open for the next videos in this series where I'll actually turn these components into a report that you can start to populate. And then I'll do another video on how to write a status report as well, how to actually populate the content in here. I hope this has been helpful. I'll see you next time.